Seb. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. It's very good to see you again. How did Spain treat you? I'm sorry I missed you when you came over. I just
Uh,
had to go to Madrid when you were over, so I don't know. I couldn't make it in the end.
it was amazing. It was amazing. We had such a great time. I hope I get to go back. Um, the people were great. The readers were great. Great reception for me, which was nice. Always nice. I have a lot of Spanish. I have a lot of books in Spanish. Much more so than any other language. So I think I have like six titles in Spanish. So and three more on the way. So
Right.
yeah, it was nice. It was fun. I mean, um, yeah, I had no complaints. We had a great time. I would
Uh-huh.
I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Yeah, no, it looked really good. I mean, I don't tend to go to that many conventions, but it looked like there was a really good turn up, and there was a lot of people came kind of for signing to catch up with you and speak to you, and the rest of the authors that were there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just what was nice about it versus maybe a kind of a at least an American convention, which is the ones I'm familiar with, is they're always like in they're always in some like big conference room or whatever. You know
Right.
what I mean? You're in some shitty hotel and you know Connecticut or something, and it's
Not
fine because
very,
you're people,
yeah, it's not
but
very
this was
memorable.
like in this no right, but this was in this beautiful you know medieval courtyard in Spain with these ancient buildings, and you could walk and just walk around and see all these beautiful old architecture and I don't know, it was just cobbled streets. It was great. It was like a very old Europe, and so it was nice. It was a nice experience for my wife and I, in addition to just like the convention stuff. It was just also like a nice trip, and the hotel was great. And so it was, yeah, it was cool. We went to Madrid first, and we stayed there for a few days, and then we went to uh what's the name of that seaside town? Um Gijón?
Irun. Is it
Gijón?
Irun?
Yeah, I can never pronounce it correctly, and every time I ask somebody how to pronounce it, they give me a different answer. So I always just say Gijón,
Ah,
maybe?
Gijon, with it. What's
Gijón.
that?
See, that's
G-I-J
different.
or no? Gijon.
That's different than what I've heard, because I've heard Gijón, and then I heard Gijón, and then I heard
Gijon.
Gijón.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway,
I know
I
what
think
you
it
mean.
depends on where you're from. I'm like it's Gijon, like I'm from America. Like I mean, just let's just. But
Yeah.
we brutalize everything. We have no culture, and so that was beautiful. We were there for like 3 days and just had such a nice time, and then just took the train over to Avila's and hung out there for like a week. It was great. So it was,
Yeah.
yeah, it was one of my nicer experiences, for sure. If not the nicest experience I've had, especially for work.
Yeah. And there was quite a few authors from the UK and from the US from all over the place. No, I saw you there.
Yeah, Kim Newman was there, and
I think Joe Abercrombie, I think, was in the photo. I think you took a
Joe
photo of
was Joe is Joe was there,
with
and
the devil. That's fantastic.
yeah, he was great. We hung out a bit. Jay Kristoff was there. He was great. I met Brandon Sanderson. He was there. He had like a whole situation. Like he brought like an
Yes, I
army of
saw it. There was
people.
videos on Instagram. He's just
Yeah,
running, high-fiving everyone that had come to see him. I was like,
yeah, and
that's
people.
crazy.
I
Yeah.
mean, he had these giant tents just with his stuff in it, and
Yeah.
lines going for half a mile to get in, just to buy, not even to meet him, just to buy stuff.
Just about the book. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
just to buy his books and stuff and merchandise. And everyone, he had this whole team of people with like their, Brandon, Dragon Steel t-shirts and stuff. So but he was really nice. I got to meet him twice. Talked to him very briefly. He was very busy, obviously. But yeah, no, and Jorge, you know, and the other gentleman whose name is escaping me, who the two organizers.
The organizers.
Yeah, were great. Yeah, I mean, it was 5 stars across the board. Like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah,
Just
and I did some business. I met a couple publishers who I had not worked with, and now there's an auction going on with two of my books between like three different publishers, two of whom I had met at the thing, and then another publisher who was a friend of one of the organizers ended up buying the rights to my book, A Child Alone with Strangers. For so I
uh,
could potentially have 4 books out in Spanish in the next like year.
uh-huh. No, I've never actually spoken to anyone about that. I'm quite curious. How involved are you when it comes to the translation? Because obviously you don't. speak Spanish. So how does that kind of work? Did you kind of have any
Um,
say? Because obviously, translating a book. My day job is as a translator, but not novels. It's kind of more like legal stuff. But I'm just kind of
yeah,
curious because it's difficult to kind of to translate something as faithful as possible
yeah.
from
It's
any
really up
language.
to the translator. I'm kind of I'm kind of at their beck and call. Um, but for the most part, the Spanish translations have been done primarily by one publisher because for the most part, I've worked with Dilettanto Mentes editorial, and but now I'm expanding to different publishers. But so I'm not sure how it'll be with them. But with Dilettanto, he would ask like, and the same with my Czech, the books that have been translated in the Czech, um, Russian, Hungarian, and but for the most part, I'm not really involved. But sometimes I'll get, especially with the Czech publisher, they'll send me like a list of questions where they'll have like a question about a phrase or
Yeah.
word, and they'll ask me if I want to rephrase it so it makes sense in Czech, because it doesn't make the direct translation doesn't make sense so things like that. So it kind of depends on the translator how much they want to involve me. And with Dilettanto Mentes for a couple of the Spanish books, they've sent me like a list of questions. But that's the extent of my involvement, where I will
Yeah.
answer queries if they need clarity on something. But I don't. Other than that, I don't.
Yeah, no, I was
I'm
just
not
curious.
really.
I'm just
Yeah,
curious about how
yeah.
that kind of thing works, like with
It's
books and
fun. It's fun and interesting to me because obviously I'm a big lover of language and the written word. So it's always interesting to me when they send me these questions. And sometimes I have to rephrase it or find phrases that make sense
yeah.
in a different language. So yeah, so it's always fascinating. But yeah, that's the extent to which I get involved. And then they just send me
And
a
then
couple of books.
is it a similar process for the actual titles of the book? Because over here sometimes they absolutely destroy movie titles from in
Right,
English and in Spanish it just has
right,
no meaning, just makes no sense, or it's absolute spoils the film because you know exactly what's going to happen.
right.
Is that something
Yeah.
that they ask you as well, or do they try and stick
N-
very
n-
kind of as direct as
No, I
possible?
I think they try and just translate as direct as possible.
Right.
I've never been involved with the title. I do know that the titles change slightly. Um, but for the most part, I think they try and stay, you know, close to what I have. Like I think, like there's Behold the Void, is Contemplare del Vacchio, it's just I think it's slightly different. But yeah, so I think they try and do the best they can. There
Yeah.
was one title I can't remember what it was. And then sometimes like I have like a Hungarian Boys in the Valley. I have no idea what it says. It looks like it says fuck a volleyball, but I don't think it's what it says. I was told it does not say fuck a volleyball. But if you look at it, it actually looks like I'll show you. It actually looks like fuck a volleyball. Where's my Hungarian one? Oh, here. See?
It
Fuck
looks
a
very much
volleyball.
like that. Yeah. I need to get
So I'm
I
hoping
need to
that's not
follow that.
I'm hoping that's not what it says. I'm hoping that's not what it says. I've been assured it's not what it says.
I bet that one sells. That one must sell well on Amazon. No,
Well,
it
it
will
was
do. I've seen it now.
well
Yeah.
it got a good laugh with my English readers when I posted about it. Like, oh, so excited to be translated into Hungarian, and they're like, dude, and they're like, a couple people were like Wilson and things like this nature, reference Tom
It would
Hanks
have been
movie.
funny if
But
it was Into the Void. Was that title would have made more sense for Into the Void? No.
right, 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 right. So yeah, but yeah, generally, um, it's been good. The translations have been picking up over the last um 6 months to a year, I think, with since Boys in the Valley and Autumn Springs now coming out. I'm getting more requests, which is great.
That's
Um,
great. Yeah.
so hopefully it keep expanding. Yeah, like Gothic, like a couple German titles now, and some. I would like to get into. I would love to get into. I would love to break into France. I have never had anything translated into French. But that would be a nice market to get into. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe one day. You never
Yeah,
know.
you should. I mean, you're doing all right. I'm sure it's not far away. Spain to France. I should have thought it'd be quite an easy
Yeah,
transition. That.
there's my agent has a sub agent who just does translation sales. And so she's been kind of she's fairly recent acquisition to my agency. So I'm hoping that once she gets like they had the big Frankfurt book fair once a year where it's all the translation sales. So I'm hoping that when she does that, maybe some new markets
Uh-huh.
will come on board. We'll see. Yeah, I don't know. Out of my control, but it would be nice. I would love to get into France. I would love to get in Japan, but yeah, those are kind of like I was telling my friend Thomas Oldehove, I'd love to get a Dutch edition of one of my books. He assured me he was on it, so we'll see.
Uh-huh.
You know who Thomas is?
No, I'm not. No. Yeah, yeah, I do. You
He
mean the one
wrote,
who wrote Hex? The one who wrote
yeah,
Hex,
yeah,
no?
Hex,
Yeah,
yeah,
sorry. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. He's a friend of mine. He was also in Spain,
Oh, he was. All
so
right.
we hung out quite a bit because we were old buddies. Yeah, so we got to hang out quite a bit when we were there, and then Katrina Ward was there. So yeah, it was like she's a good friend of mine. So it was nice that I had some people I knew, and I became buddies with Joe Abercrombie. He was just very nice, and
He's
Jay
great.
Kristoff was very nice.
The Devils
Yeah,
is
just very.
fantastic. I don't know if you read The Devils yet, but boy, it's a fantastic
I
book.
haven't read it yet. I'm dying to read it. I just have to get through my stack of
Sure. Stack of
books to
books to
blurb.
blurb and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, before I can read what I want. Not that I don't want to read these books, but you know how it is. Nice
Yeah.
to pick and choose. I have a library of 10,000 books, and I can't read any of them because all I do is read like
I'm pretty much the same. I just keep buying and
the
buying
new
and
horror
buying. But
book.
I've got
Yeah,
books that I want to do for interviews. I just don't get around to the ones that I buy. Yeah.
yeah. I literally just my wife made me. She was like, I wasn't given a choice. I recently just got like a storage unit, like and put up some shelving in there, and I'm in the process of moving about 50 boxes of books out of my house and into the storage unit because she's like if it's not on a shelf, it goes. That was
Yeah,
her.
yeah.
And
No,
my
you
house
must. I'm,
is
I'm the same. I mean, I've got these here. Kind
yeah,
of, it looks good for show on the interview, but my wife hates
yeah,
these things here.
right. She's not a clutterer. She loves the
Yeah.
books. She's like she's a big reader. She loves having the books, but she's like, but it's gotten to the point where there's like the coffee table's occupied and the kitchen table's getting slowly creeping, stacks are slowly creeping under the kitchen counter. And so I think she's sort of like, yeah, no, get a
That's
storage
enough.
unit, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
You got the book coming out soon. I've loved it.
yeah.
It's quite a shift in well, it's not a shift in genre, but yeah, it's a shift in genre in that it feels a lot more light-hearted most of the book. It's very poignant and very dark, and the the Fracassi genes kind of DNA there, but at the same time,
Right.
it's got this whodunit, um, Agatha Christie kind of dark, pitch black humor there as well, which I really enjoyed. Um, I'm quite curious, how long have you been working on this project, and was it always your kind of decision to move from the third rule of time travel? I think was the last book. No, well, you really released the jukebox kind of the novella just afterwards, but was it always kind of
Yeah,
intention
that
to?
that
Did
was
you
just a
always have
short
kind of an
story, but
intention which order you released the books, or did this just kind of was it happenstance that this is the next one that happened to come out next?
no, it just happenstance. I have so I don't have a ton of control over when the books come out. In to the point where I think, a couple of years ago, or I guess at the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, I had A Child Alone with Strangers, Gothic, and Boys in the Valley all came out within like a 6 month,
Yeah,
like literally I think within 7 months of each other. And that, and people, which is not a good thing because it's like three brand new
yeah,
releases that you have to kind of promote. But that's a situation where that wasn't supposed to be that way. Like Child Alone with Strangers was supposed to come out like in August of 2022, and then it got pushed, and then it got pushed, and then Gothic got pushed, so and then Boys wasn't moving because that was a big five release. So sometimes it just kind of you kind of like you're a yeah, I don't want to say a victim of the machine,
victim.
but
Yeah,
you just kind of like you can only control so much. So yeah, I try to put out I'm always trying my goal is always to have two books a year. At least that's what I've been doing since 2023. So it's been 2 years, and this year I'll have two books, and next year I'll have two books, and 2027 I'll have two books. So that's
yeah,
always my goal. But yeah, as far as like the types of stories or like the genre, um, it's really just kind of I write whatever I feel like writing, you know, and then it's kind of comes down to the order in which it sells. So, for example, I wrote Third Rule of Time Travel was written right after Boys in the Valley, I think. And then I wrote um uh um what's coming out. So, like anyway, but it was, I think a couple books came out before, like the order was backwards. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
so Child Alone with Strangers was the first book I wrote, but then yeah. So anyway, so it's also kind of like who it sells to, what their slate looks like. So I have a book coming out at the end of 2027, for example, that has not been announced yet, that I wrote um like, back like 3 years ago, and have written like 3 or 4 books since. Um so yeah, so it's just kind of, but as far as like what I write, um I don't really think too much about it. I just kind of write whatever story intrigues me.
Yeah.
Um what excites me, because I think to write a novel um you have to really want to you have to really want to write that story. You know what I mean? It's a lot of work, it's a lot
Yeah.
of time, and you have to really be invested in it, and it has to be something that excites you as a writer, that intrigues you, that you connect with, in a very strong way. So it's usually whatever. Like right now, I have 2 ideas. I'm not sure which one I'm going to write next, because I'm kind of in the middle of writing one right now, and I can't really think too much that way. I have to kind of do one at a time. Um, so yeah, so I'm not, and one's like a sci-fi mystery, and one's like a horror novel. So, and I'm not sure which one I'll write next. So it'll kind of depend on which one I
You
think
kind of
is,
feel
well,
more attached
yeah,
to, more.
whatever I feel more attached to, whatever excites me more. Um, yeah, so that's kind of the way I work, and I just try and keep writing and keep hoping. Like, like I said, the book that's coming out summer of 2027, we've been shopping that book for, you know, 2 years, 3 years, and then we kind of took it off the market. I released a couple more books, and then we put it back into the market because Boys in the Valley did pretty well. Um, and we got and then we got we've had a new publisher who wanted it, so a Big Five Press. So yeah, so it's all kind of all I just write whatever I feel like writing, and then hope that it sells.
And the
And
luck
then
of the
the
draw
rest is out of
after
my
that. Yeah.
control. And
Uh-huh.
then I try and obviously I try and create enough of a promotional gap between titles, so that each one has its own runway and breathing space for promotional purposes and sales purposes.
Uh-huh. So, I mean, obviously, with this one, it's kind of the setting is exactly the opposite of you'd expect from us. I mean, would you describe it as I kind of call it a slasher, a kind of a geriatric slasher, if you will, or something like that, but a geriatric slasher whodunit, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, it kind of goes against the slasher grain to set it in this world where we're typically the slasher fodder is these teen kids running away, getting killed. They've got all their life ahead of them, so they've got everything to lose. Whereas here we've got these old age pensioners in this residence. What was it about that attracted you? Because um, at, at first, kind of, if you first think about the idea, you wouldn't think it worked because it's kind of there's these guys these people that are sat on sofas watching the telly, and they couldn't care less if they're still there or if they're going to get killed. So what was it
Right.
about that you saw there was going to be a niche there? How did you see that? What did you see in that was kind of ripe for the picking?
Uh, I liked, I'm the kind of writer who I prey on vulnerability. I think a lot of horror writers do. I think Stephen King certainly does. And I think that's why you see a lot of kids in horror fiction, because the kids are vulnerable. Um, and they have this kind of innocence. And as a reader, you feel it's like, you feel you're much more worried about, you know, um, like a child in danger than you are an adult in danger. And it's not necessarily why I decided to do something like this, but I do think what it did do is it created for me a very intriguing, um, what I call and response. So I was very intrigued at how these elderly residents would respond to something like this, or like a serial killer in their community. Like that was really what drew me to it, was not so much, oh, I'm gonna have so much fun killing a bunch of old
Yeah.
people, because if you've read the book, that's not, it's really, these characters are very,
Yeah.
have a lot of depth, and they're very complex, and they have hopes and dreams. To your point, they have hopes and dreams too, and they want to live out their golden years and peace and harmony, and they find love, and they have all the beautiful things that humans have. They're awkward about love, and they're stubborn about independence, and they have dreams of of travel and of experiencing wonderful things in life, and then this like grenade drops in the in the room. This serial killer arrives on the scene and starts picking off these people. And so for me, I got very excited about how would a group of elderly people respond to this fox in the henhouse scenario. What would that look like? Where would they go to for help? Would they get help? Would people care? Um, and so those were all really intriguing questions for me, and that's what really sucked me into to wanting to write this story.
I mean, you just explained what I was going to ask you. I mean, the reason why I asked you that question is because having read the book now, these characters have got, it felt like they have so much more to live for than
Yeah,
the typical slasher fodder in the other films because they don't have any kind of character. Their characters aren't fleshed out at all, and they kind of get killed off in the first 5, 10, 15 minutes. Whereas these people have they've got so much life experience, and at the same time, because they're in this place now, they start realizing everything that they've regretted not having done, and they've got all this that they want to live for, and it just
yeah,
works so much more than a typical slasher.
yeah. Yeah. For me, it was writing this book. It was really never about the kills, in the sense of a true slasher, if you will, like a Friday the 13th or what have you. Um, it was really about the people, like I said, and how and these characters and how they would react, and not just how they would react to the killer, but how they would react to each other.
Yeah.
What would that look like? Because like I've mentioned this, a couple interviews, but it's such a good way to explain it, which is that like I always think about one thing I hate is when a TV show has like Lost, when you have a cast, an isolated cast of say 50 people, but you only focus on five of those people or six of those people. And it's always those five or six people that have all the adventures and do all the crazy stuff. And then the other 40 people are just like in the background digging ditches or
Yeah.
playing volleyball or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And like and that's what I wanted not to do with Autumn Springs. And it's similarly to Boys in the Valley, which had a cast of 35. Autumn Springs is a cast of over 80 people. There's 80 residents, there's administrators, there's police, there's nurses, there's doctors, and I wanted it to be a living, breathing community, and I wanted to give these B and C role players life and breath and quirks and personalities, and so all of that played into the idea of like that call and response that I mentioned, which is like there's a serial killer in their midst, but there's already some kind of weird stuff going on, right? With a few of these residents. There's
Yeah.
the three sisters who may or may not be witches. There's this kind of retired filmmaker.
Conspiracy
There's the
theory guy. Yeah.
yeah, there's the conspiracy theorist, and so I really loved all of that, and it created a very rich uh, uh, you know fabric for the story and for Autumn Springs as a setting. So yeah, so that was really fun for me. So that I really wanted to get into like what would this environment look like if you added this incredibly dark dynamic to it, and unexpected dynamic to it. So it was a lot of fun to explore a lot of that in the book and with these different characters.
Uh-huh. You mentioned that like there's some kind of strange shenanigans going on with the possible three witches there.
Yeah.
This guy who thinks he's kind of the conspiracy theories. Were they all things that came afterwards, or were they all kind of characters that you wanted to throw in there? I don't want to spoil it at all, but were they all kind of ideas that you came up with to throw as many red herrings in there as possible to make it all as conspicuous as possible?
Well, you definitely want to have some misdirection, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So I think that was an end result. It wasn't necessarily why I. There are some there are some there are some moments in the book that are that I put in there purely for misdirection, and there are some characters who maybe do things that make you question their motives, and so that was all very purposeful. I think for the most part, the characters that came to life for me, um, were less about that and more about just wanting to create this kind of rich atmosphere of
Yeah.
colorful three-dimensional characters. But it does because you do because what it does though is it creates opportunities for me as a writer, where where I get to be like, oh well, this guy or this gal she has this kind of background, or she is known for doing this kind of weird quirky thing. Maybe I can dive into that a little bit, and maybe I can lead the reader to think about that a little bit more than maybe they should be thinking about it. It just gives you more. It gives you more flexibility as a writer to create that misdirection and to create those red herrings. If you have a lot of places you can go with it, you know what I mean. If you only have five people, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean. It's one of the five. So, but when you have a cast of 80 and you really um, give screen time, if you will, or page time, if you will, to half of those people, or then it could be anyone. And so that was definitely an end result of fleshing out all these personalities.
Huh? And because there are so many kind of different characters in there with these different um, quirks, certain chapters, all of a sudden, there's a sudden kind of shift to something that I didn't expect to come with certain characters. I'm quite curious how you decided how to kind of make sure that each jump in the story, in the tone of the story, to kind of to focus on another person or character, how you kept that as smooth as possible with having so many people in there.
Yeah, I mean, I do like jumping around. I do like switching POVs. I've done it in most of my books. Child Alone with Strangers, Boys in the Valley certainly had five different POVs, and you went from Peter, the main character, to David, to Father Pooler, Father Andrew, whoever it was, and Barth, and that kind of gave the reader some different angles on what's happening, right? It's like watching a car crash, and if you're watching it from a cliff high above, or if you're watching, or if you're in the car, or if you're
Yeah.
standing by the side of the road, you're going to see things differently. So for me, with what I try and do you know is give each not just give each character a unique personality, but I'd like to give them a unique voice. So
Right.
without going over the top. So when you read a chapter from Rose POV, for example, that chapter is written in a kind of a Rose way. When you read a chapter from the POV of Stan, the conspiracy
Yeah.
theorist, if you read it,
Oh,
if
yeah.
you were to read one of Rose's chapters and then read a Stan's chapter, you'll and then just if you're just looking for how it's written, you'll notice how different I wrote Stan's chapter.
Oh,
It's
they
more
really are
herky
different. Yeah.
jerky.
Miller
Yeah,
was a
there's more.
character that really stood out as well. For example, there's really different
Yeah,
kind of stuff to Miller as well. Yeah.
yeah. So, you don't want the reader to necessarily notice,
Yeah.
but you want them to feel it. You want them to notice subconsciously. So yeah. So, and same with like Igor, the chess playing Russian
Yeah.
with the bad heart, and Mickey, whatever. And so it's all part of, and then sometimes you can use that to your advantage, because really use it to your advantage, especially when you're talking about a mystery, like the scene, like the POV of the detective, for example, ends up really playing into, it really allowed me to do some fun stuff with the mystery of it all, because I
Yeah.
was giving only half the information. 'Cause, it's like a phone call. You're only hearing what the one person is hearing, saying. You can't hear what the other person is saying. So it gives you opportunities for that as well. But yeah, for me, when I write POV chapters, I definitely make an effort to not only, make sure that the personality of that character is getting across, but also to write the chapter to a degree has with that personality in mind, so that it has the feel of that character, and that I think is helps the reader sink into that POV more comfortably as well, because now they're kind of like they feel like they've shifted into this character, now they're shifting into this character, and I think you want to make that bet as well as you can for the reader, so that they feel comfortable doing that, and they're not it's
You
not
know,
you never want it to be And if it is jarring, it's purposely so because
No, I
that's
didn't ask you because it was jarring. I just asked you because exactly the opposite. It
no.
wasn't jarring at all because
Oh
there
no,
are
but I mean,
we do
but there are
switch.
POVs, but there are POVs that were purposely jarring, and that's what I meant.
Yeah, I just didn't.
But
I don't want to give anything away because there's certain ones that are
right,
jarring. It's like, oh,
right,
right, I'm this
yeah,
character
no,
now.
spoiler
That's
free,
why.
yeah,
That's what I
yeah,
didn't want to say. Yeah, exactly. Um, so obviously this is a who done it. But it's with a difference. And there's been so many who done it. We've got Agatha Christie. I mean, you've even mentioned that one of the characters got his Hercule
yeah,
Poirot mustache and things like that.
yeah,
How
very
much did you want to
purposeful, yeah.
lean into kind of formulaic whodunits, and how did you go about upending that?
Um,
Because it's a very crowded
it's a good
subgenre, especially
question.
with
It's a good
like
question.
Glass Onion and those kind of things. Just recently, there's a lot of
Yeah. So, so when I wrote this book, I had written another book called The Blue Butterfly that was also that hasn't come out yet, but has been sold. And that was a whodunit. I'm sorry, my computer's beeping at me. That was a whodunit um as well. And with that, but there was a lot going on in that book. Like there's a speculative element, there's like a time travel element, there's a whodunit element, there's a horror element, and but it's also a mystery. And with that book, I had the most outrageously extensive outline you can imagine. Like because I was, in other words, I pre-programmed the writing of that book to such a degree that I knew exactly I was putting in the misdirection chapters. I know I had it all like
yeah.
laid out, like literally in a spreadsheet. And with this book, um, I knew that I wanted to hide who the killer was. But honestly, well, two things. One is this book would not allow me to outline it for whatever reason, and I'm a big outliner. Um, and for whatever reason, Autumn Springs, even though I knew the characters very well, I was very comfortable with the setting, and I had some definite set pieces in my head, and I kind of had a gist of where the story would go. I couldn't outline it. Like I was physically, literally could not outline it. Like, and I tried for like 2 or 3 weeks. I was sitting at my computer with a spreadsheet in front of me, trying to lay out the beats. But sometimes it just happens where the story doesn't want to be told that way. And this was one of those times.
Sorry
It
to
was
interrupt, but did you know the ending while you were trying to, or you didn't know
no,
the ending either? No, neither.
no, no.
Right.
And and no, I really did. I knew like 3 scenes that I knew I wanted to get to. Um, but I didn't know who the killer was. I didn't know how it was going to end. So it was much more organic. And so anyway, so to write a who done it that way is very difficult because of all the things we just talked about, the misdirections and the red herrings. And when you're kind of writing it, and so finally I got to the point where I was like, well, I'm just gonna have to write it. I'm just gonna start writing this book and hope for the best. But originally when I wrote the book, I wasn't really focused that much on the who done it aspect. I was more focused on, oh, this is just going to be a slasher with some dark humor and some great characters. And
Mhm.
then as I kind of got going and I kind of started living in this world with these people and kind of getting more deeper into the story, I realized that I wanted to create make that more part of the fun of the book. And so I kind of really honestly I went back and did a complete rewrite from the beginning to the end,
Mm.
where I made that whodunit aspect much more wove it much more deeply into the book. Um, and so that originally wasn't part of like the first draft. It
Right.
was there, obviously. I didn't like say who it was from the page one, but it just wasn't. It just wasn't. It wasn't important to me, and I was much more focused on the horror and the slashers and the characters and the character arcs. Like Rose's character arc to me is such a wonderful arc throughout the book, as her and Miller's relationship and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, but then I kind of talked to my editor and my agent and stuff, and we all decided, yeah, let's amp up the mystery of it. And so that was something I did kind of on a second pass, which is very unusual for me. Usually I do a first draft. I do what I call my second draft is usually is what I refer to as, me putting the wallpaper up and hanging the shutters, and like I try and make it pretty, and I focus on the writing, I focus on the dialogue,
Mhm.
and I really just kind of enhance the story, and then I have like a polish, and that's usually it. So my first drafts are usually about 80 to 90% of what's in the final published book. So this was a scenario where, and it's probably because I could not outline it, that I actually did go back and did a pretty major rewrite where I infused a lot of that whodunit aspect. So it was not something I'd planned on doing, or at least not
Right.
something that was a priority for me until I had finished the book. And then I was kind of like, it'd be fun to go back and make that more of a mystery for readers. So that's what I did.
Uh-huh. Okay. Also, like I said, it's a slasher set in kind of a geriatric home. Whilst it is a slasher, at the same time, it's also very geriatric specific slayings, if we can put it that way. And
Yeah.
some of them are pretty far out there. I'm quite curious
Yeah. There's a
how
slight
you
suspension of disbelief you have to roll
yeah,
with
but
in this book.
that's why I want to kind of how did you know where to kind of draw the limits? I imagine maybe you spoke to some doctors, nurses to find out what kind of things you could do to these people. What kind of line did you draw there to kind of to keep it as grounded as possible to make it? It's also fun because it's some of the deaths are funny.
Yeah, they are funny and they're darkly comic, sure. And
Yeah,
and that was always purposeful to kind of I love the idea of having this book be having it's got a lot of tonal layers. It's at times it's funny, at times it's very much not funny. At times it's very scary, and at times it's very sad. And so I kind of like that I had giving that experience to readers. But
Also,
yeah,
before
mobile,
you carry on, I just want to say that
yeah,
also some of the it's not a spoiler or anything, but some of the kills are almost they're very specific to the people. It's kind of like almost they expect to die in the. I don't want to give it away, but they expect they're going to live their last days in this residence, and kind of what happens to them in the end is kind of
it,
their kind of destiny
it's
that they would have kind of liked that without giving anything else away.
there's a bit of dream fulfillment going on. Yeah, and that was all purposeful. So with it's very much like if you my I wrote a book called The Third Rule of Time Travel, which is
Yep.
a time travel story, and it's very grounded in hard science, and um and I and but there are also some speculative elements to that story that kind of are thrown in the basically are thrown in the face of all this hard science I just laid out for 200 pages. So similarly with Autumn Springs, and with all my work generally, I always like the story itself. I like the story world to feel very real and very grounded. Um, and so it's not completely just like wild fabrication, because I think if you do that, then I don't think the reader buys in emotionally. I think the reader needs to feel like they're in the shoes of these characters, that this could happen to them, that this is a very real setting. So in that sense, I always try and keep everything very, very grounded when it comes to characters and what's happening to them, and not being too unrealistic. Um, and with some of the stuff that's going on in the book, as far as the line is concerned, I was constantly thinking about the line, to be honest with you.
Mhm.
So it's a good question. And there are moments where I was like, is this too far? Is
Yeah,
this too
because that's what I
far?
mean, especially kind of the farcical ones. It's kind of maybe the older
Yeah.
audience or people who are kind of in the medical profession might not appreciate this kind
Yeah.
of.
Right. And
But you can't please anyone.
I think with any book or movie, you're always going to be like saying, "Oh, hey, that would never be that
Yeah.
way," or there's always some doctor who's like, "That's not what would happen if you shocked
But you're
somebody."
always going to offend
But
someone. Someone's always going to find offense
right,
from
right,
something.
right. Yeah. So no, but when I write, like I wrote, my next novel after Autumn Springs is a Civil War horror novel. And similarly, I'm sure there are things in there that I probably use creative flexibility on,
Yeah.
facts of the Civil War, which is probably going to get me in trouble with a lot of the Civil War buffs, but maybe not. Because but I also try very, very hard to make things factual as I can. So this is a situation with Autumn Springs where I tried, I did everything I could to stay factual with how things go
Yeah.
with the devices that are used. Um, and and but are there liberties taken? Probably. Um, but even those are kind of addressed in the book too, like kind of like, well, I'm glad that worked out, from
Yeah.
the perspective of some of the characters. And so that was always, but ultimately my books, my books are entertainment. I write books to entertain people. I am not in the business of writing books to get across an agenda or to get across something or to preach. Like my books are always going to be, they're always going to be built to entertain. And so I wanted this book to be fun, and I wanted it to be emotional, and I wanted it to be I wanted these characters to feel real, and I wanted the kills to be visceral, and shocking, and to your point, and weirdly darkly fun to a degree. There's a gag with dentures. There's a gag with a heart, thing. I play on that very purposely because that's what makes it fun. And I'm sure there are people who are going to be reading this book who are in their 80s who are going to laugh their asses off because it's true and it's funny.
Yeah, they can
And
imagine it happening to themselves or their husbands or whatever. Yeah.
right, right. And so yeah, and I do think about the line, and it's a really good question because I do think about that constantly. Because what I don't want to do is take the reader out of the story.
Yeah.
I never want the reader to be like, oh, that okay, now I've you've lost me because I don't that would never happen. But if it could happen, that's okay.
Yeah.
And there are always going to be readers who are skeptics and are going to come into it with a very cynical eye. But for the most part, readers just want to be entertained and they want to have fun and they want to enjoy the story. So, but yeah, I feel like I did pretty good in this one. But yeah, it gets wild,
Yeah.
for sure. And the killer, I think has a very playful imagination,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of ways it's a game to that person, so or them. I'm not even going to say if it's one person or many persons, but so yeah, so that was part of it too. Was I kind of liked the idea of this box of chocolates, and this kind of freedom for this killer to do whatever they wanted to do, and nobody could do anything to stop them. I
Yeah.
think is what really excited them, and got them interested in Autumn Springs in the first place. So yeah, so
But yeah,
that's
no, I loved it. It's just like the killer's inventiveness. It's just so, so good that it could either be really
well, there's
humorous or
only
later on in the book. I don't want to
yeah,
say
there's
who
only so
or
many
why, but
times you want to see somebody like, I don't know, like it's how much fun is, and the other thing is, I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't want to interrupt
no,
what
it's
you're
okay.
saying, but the other thing about the kills, which is interesting about the kills themselves, is that there's two things about the kills that are worth noting. One is that when you do kill somebody in a way that is not far-fetched or not imaginative, it has an effect because now you're
That's what I was going to
contrasting.
say now. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Later
sorry,
on
I
in the
didn't mean to
book, later
truncate
on
it.
in the book, there's one
Yeah.
specific, which it's very hard to bring a tear to my eye, but there's one later on in the book that I was on the train, so I managed not to cry, but it really hit me really hard.
Sorry.
So it worked.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a couple of emails already about that. So yeah, and right, but that's exactly right. And that's what I meant by tonal layers, because you may think as a reader, oh, this is going to be kind of like a romp, and I'm just going to sort of like laugh these off. And then when you realize that's not what's going to happen, I think it's like kind of in a way you're subverting expectations of a reader, which is
Yeah.
always something that writers try
Absolutely, you're
very
right.
try
Would do.
very
Yeah.
hard to do. But the other thing about the kills that you might find interesting that is like that everything is very purposeful. And I've said this is kind of my writer motto or mantra, which is that everything I do and every book I write is in service to the story. From the characters to the prose, to the page count, to the pacing, to the kills and the horror and all that. Everything is in service. What's the best way to tell this story, and what's going to make the most effective way to tell this story? And I think when you have certain kills, if you will, are very, no, this is just kind of like, I'm going to use a very broad explanation so nothing will be given away. But it's like, let's say you have certain kills that are very explicit and very detailed. And I'm going to like take you through it step by step by step
Mhm.
in every painful moment. And then there are kills that are more like quirky and, borderline comic until they're not. And then there are kills that are like completely off screen, you know, off the page, and you only hear about it. And all of those, that whole range is very purposely done by me because I want to give you the reader a different feeling of these moments. Like I'm very purposely doing it this way so that you feel a certain way. I'm very
Yeah.
purposely doing it this way so you're feeling it
Different
as a
levels
certain way.
kind of anxiety or yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And there's reasons for that end up playing down, in the long run, um, that end up making the book a journey, an emotional journey as well as a story plot driven journey. And so those are all things that I do purposely, and I've done it with my other books as well. Specifically, Boys in the Valley was a book where I played a lot on the ways I um, the ways I told about the more horrific moments in that book. Some moments are, like I said, off screen completely, and some are just alluded to, and some are very visceral and detailed. And that's all very purposeful because I want the reader to feel certain ways about certain moments. And so that's one way I do it.
Mhm. Something else that worked really, really well is the fact that because they're in this very small community, they can't really escape. There's one moment where they do want to because of what's going on. They're calling home and saying we want to leave, and
Yeah,
the families don't want to because just like kind of tends to happen in real life,
yeah,
once you get old, you get neglected and end up in a home. But so it was
yeah,
kind of like it was a doubly claustrophobic because they couldn't leave and they couldn't leave because the family outside didn't want to let them out. So it was almost like a contained thriller, almost like Demons, the film Demons, like that they can't get out of the cinema. It just kind of that
yeah.
must have really really helped you to contain the whole story, you know?
I'm a big fan of isolation horror, and I was very pleased when I started writing this book, um, because there's actually a section in the book called Exodus, and I had it in my mind that when I started the book, again, this is all back to me not being able to outline anything, but I had in my mind that there would be a point in this book where a lot of the residents would leave, and I was kind of prepared for it. I was mentally prepared for it. I kind of knew what I would do when that happened, and then when I kind of got closer to that moment, I realized, the reality is, where are they going to go?
Yeah.
Like, the reality is, who's going to help them? And even if they are, even if staying means dying or potentially dying, wh where are they going to, like, where, I mean, literally, where are they going to go? Where are they going to, so, and obviously some of them have this opportunities where they have a family that would take them in, or but you're talking about people who are in a retirement community in upstate New York who are there for a reason. And the main reason they're there is probably because they have nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
Or they choose for that kind of life. They just want to be with
They don't want to
people
be,
like that.
yeah, don't want to be a
They want
burden
to be
on
with
the family in
like-minded
the
people.
first place. Yeah.
Right. And the burden on the family thing is something that I play on as well with Rose, our main protagonist, and the fact that her daughter, um, rather ironically, is saying,
Come
come live
home. Yeah,
with me."
from the very beginning of the book. Yeah.
Yeah, and Rose is sort of the one who's fighting it. So fighting that because she's so independent and she craves independence and she doesn't want to be, you know, um, a burden, and she also doesn't want to be a babysitter and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of that was pulled from my own experiences with my own parents
Right.
and my wife's parents, and just and just being aware of what happens to you what happens to folks when they get older, and they what worries them and what scares them, and what are their desires, and what are the things they think about, and how their lives are very complex but kind of in a different way. The lens has shifted somewhat from what maybe people who are in midlife experience versus people who are young experience. And so all that stuff was fascinating to me. And yeah, but to your point about that moment in the story, it sort of caught me off guard. And then when I did think about it, when I did realize, oh, I'm going to have this moment, this chapter, um, and I was getting excited to write it because I'm like, oh, it's going to be funny. When I write it, it's going to be funny. And it was like the saddest fucking thing I've ever written in my
Yeah.
life. And I was just like, I was really emotional writing it.
Yeah, because as you
So
said
even,
before, your books aren't specifically allegoric, but
yeah,
there it just felt like you were really, really kind of angry that the world is the way it
yeah,
is, that these people they've got nowhere to go and there's no escape from
yeah,
what's going on there.
yeah. And it really, I don't want to say it opened my eyes, but it definitely surprised me. It caught me off guard as the writer. And it really, and I found it very interesting. And like I said, and I mentioned this in the afterword of the book, went through my book, the loss of both of my parents in the process of writing this book. And a lot of that also made it into the book. And a lot of that also played into some of the characters. My father suffered from dementia, and I had to take care of him for a few months. I had to live with him and my mom, and who was invalid, and and a lot of the stuff that a lot of the experiences, you know, opened my eyes to end of life or near end of life realities, and so that a lot of that got layered into the book, and then a lot of the things that I talked about with my mother after my father passed. She passed about 6 months later, and but we talked a lot about she and I about what she was worried about, the burden on her family, the burden on us kids. Who's going to take care of me? I can't make my own meals. I can, she can barely get up to the bedroom and down into the bathroom and back. So and some of the fears and some of the concerns, but also there's like this, and this is in the book as well, sort of a sub theme is there's this kind of, I don't want to say comfort, but there's a familiarity with death that these residents have. And I talk about that in the book a little bit, where death is kind of around. He's kind of there. Um, and he's sort of like, you know, holding your hand, while you're falling asleep, and he's not maybe under the table when you're having that first cup of coffee, or he's a shadow in the corner, when you're
Yeah,
watching
that
TV.
is that is very present during the book, but that must have been kind of a double-edged sword for you at the same time because these people having death all around them anyway, and then all of a sudden death
Right.
turns up on their doorstep.
Yeah.
How do you juggle that and write it and keep it tense?
But that's one of the things that really drew me to this book. I love these kind of complex narratives and psychological complexity of these kind of stories, because that's what really got me excited about writing the book, and that's why I put so much of that into the book. Like, and I kind of used the police detective as a bit of an avatar for um uh uh um kind of like the idea of like, oh well, people are dying in a retirement home. Like, where's the headline? It happens. And that lack of response kind of played into some of the tragedy, right? And but what I really found fascinating, and you'd have to dig deep to extract this from the text, but it's definitely there, which is um, the contrast between familiarity and a degree of comfort with the idea of death, and a life being violently taken. And that, I think, that contrast is something that I really loved playing with emotionally with these different residents. Where it's like, hey, look, you tell me I'm going to spend the next, you know, 8, 9, 10, 12 years, whatever it is, um, enjoying my life and being with friends and doing some light traveling and, playing, going to Scrabble Tuesdays, and that's one thing, and and hopefully dying peace. But you tell me there's somebody, you're dropping a rabid dog
Mhm.
in the room who's now attacking and killing and hurting. All of a sudden, death is no longer that friend. All of a sudden, now hold on, that's not the way things are going to go. And that, I think, is part of what comes out of Rose's strength. Um, is that strength of saying like, no, 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 that's not the way this is going to go. That's not what we signed up for. And that's not acceptable in a way. It's like the way Rose would talk, like, no, that's not acceptable. And and so that was really interesting for me to play with that. So I enjoyed stuff like that. I enjoyed the challenge of saying, like, well, look, on one hand, like, yeah, of course they know that they probably don't have a long time to live natural lives, but at the same time, they're not going to just roll over if somebody's out there hurting their friends. And so that was definitely something I played with throughout the book, especially with
And
Rose in particular.
I think that you really kind of brought that to the fore through kind of showing how these residents are kind of when they get to this place, they're almost like born again. They can be kind of kids again. They can flirt
Yeah,
again, and they play games and
really
all these
good
different
point.
kind of things. And that kind of really kind of worked to make it almost feel like this kind of the slashes that we see with the adolescents, because these are almost like kids in the same way, because this kind of started afresh in this new place with these new people.
Yeah, I mean, at one point, Rose's daughter called it an octogenarian orphanage, right? Which is a kind of also like a bit of a wink to Boys in the Valley and the similarities between the two stories. But yeah, and she's a great line, which I loved. And I don't give myself credit; I give the character credit. But she's a great line where she's like, "It's like a college dorm with all the drugs and none of the sex." And then
Yeah.
Rose says, "You'd be surprised." Right? What language?
Well,
First,
yeah.
she chides her for her language, and she goes, "Then you'd be surprised." And yeah, and that's kind of the fun of it, right? Is that you said that's very well put, which is like they do have this kind of new lease on life because they're kind of stripped of all the anxieties of the burdens of having to take care of this, take care of that, and worry about this. Now they can just be in this place where they're taken care of. They have all the comforts of that they want. They're not abused. They're not neglected. And that was one of the and even like there's a couple moments where I don't want to give things away for readers, but there's a couple moments where I really try to take the time with a couple of the characters are not even who are minor characters to talk a bit about their history and to talk a bit about what they were hoping to get from their later years. And because I really wanted to get across, like, look, these are real people. These are real people with real lives and real dreams and real pasts and have complex personalities. And part of that, to your point from the beginning of the conversation, yeah, part of that is because I want the reader to feel something for them so that when they are harmed, there's more of an emotional, visceral impact. But more so, it's because I wanted to. I didn't want these to be. I didn't want this to be a house full of cutouts. I wanted these to be a living, breathing community where all these residents had so much going on, and you really felt like, in a way, my hope is when you're reading this book, you really feel like you're walking around this campus, meeting these different people and talking to these different people and learning about these people's lives, and that's really part of the charm, I think,
No,
of the
it
book.
works really
And
well. You nailed it,
yeah,
because when I was walking home just after reading the end of the book today, and I've just turned 50, but I was walking home and I was looking at life as if I was like 80 or 90. I just kind of you just really pulled me into the book so well.
okay, you just finished it. You just finished it earlier today.
Just finished it earlier today, and I was just
Oh,
walking
okay.
around, and I
All right.
just felt like I
So
was
you
80 instead
know,
of 50. Yeah. So it really,
yeah.
really, really hits home. Yeah, it's good.
Oh yeah, good. Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, yeah. I won't get into the ending of the book, obviously, but interestingly, when I wrote the ending, you might find this interesting since you just freshly read it. Is I had planned on there being this is kind of the point of how the story sort of was ever evolving in my mind as I was writing it, and but when I first wrote the ending, I had planned on writing one more scene, one
Uh-huh.
more chapter, and it was going to kind of change a lot of the complexion of a lot of the what you'd already read throughout the book. And it was one of those moments where, as a writer, you just realize, like, nope, nope, this is it. This is the end. This is how it should end. And I've done that before, and that's happened to me before, where I had an expectation for how something was going to go or how a book was going to end. And sometimes, just at that moment when you're writing it, you realize, nope, you know what, we're not gonna do that. We're gonna do this instead, and just kind of put a little. And I'm just kind of talking more for me as a writer. It was fascinating for me as a writer because I'm usually so anal about outlining Same as my screenplays. It's just kind of something I'm used to doing, and so it was a bit of an adventure for me too.
Did
This
you
this
try
book.
did you try I imagine you had other people read it apart from kind of your editor and your agent. Did you kind of give them a taste of the other ending and did they say no, or did you just kind of make that decision
No,
on your own?
honestly, nobody read this book um, pre-publication except for my wife, my editor, and my agent.
All right.
And it's not sometimes earlier in my career, I was much more eager to do exactly what you're describing, which is like give it to a few friends, give it to a few writers, and kind of get feedback and kind of see if there's things. And lately, I've not been doing that. I don't. I kind of I don't know. I think I'm so protective now
Yeah. Too many cooks spoil
of
the
what.
broth, maybe, no? And you kind of so
Yeah, and I
if you
think
get
it's
other ideas, it kind of
yeah, and
distracts what
feedback is
makes it more
always
fun.
good. I think with this book in particular, um, I didn't want. I felt really good about it, and I just and because it was so complex, because there were so many moving pieces, um, and because I did such a massive rewrite as it was, I just kind of I knew, much like with Third Rule of Time Travel, which was another book that was incredibly complex to write, and there's so much going on in that book, and there's different timelines, and there's time travel, and there's whatever, and different realities, and blah blah blah, and so that was one of those things where it's like, you know what, if I don't even want to, like, I just got to get it to the finish line, and like it's like it's so tight, in a way that you just want to like deliver it and be like, that's it. And this was kind of that kind of book. So I think, but yeah, but it was actually, but like I said, it was my editor and my agent and I, kind of collectively agreed that, like, to amp up the whodunit part. And that was a big decision for me because I'm not a guy who likes rewriting structurally. I love rewriting prose and dialogue and
Yeah.
sweetening
Not
things and
actually
making it read.
shifting the story
Yeah,
around.
but I don't like rewriting structure. And so it was a big deal for me to do that, and I had to think about it for a few days before I decided to do it. Um, but it definitely made the book better. But it made the book very different. Like if you had read the first draft of this book compared to what's been published, I think you would have had a much different experience as a reader.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's a better experience. I'm hoping it's. I don't think it's a better experience, but you would have had a different experience because I definitely it just tonally and also the mystery side of it would have been a different read. So yeah, so that was really interesting for me to go through that process, and that's something I hadn't done before, and may do again, may do again in the future, but preferably I'd like to know what I'm doing before I do it.
Uh-huh. I've not really talked about the characters too much because I don't want to give it away. That's kind of one of the pleasures of this book is to kind of to learn these characters. So I didn't want to kind of really want to
Yeah.
ask too much about them, but I have seen on social media that the people, as soon as they've finished reading the ARC, they were saying, "Hey, I've just finished it yesterday, and today I was at work, and I just couldn't stop realizing how much I miss Rose and Miller." So it's like,
Mm,
I mean, these characters are gorgeous. They're so well written.
thank you.
Would I mean, yeah, obviously you finished the book and you said that you had an idea for another chapter, but would you ever? Is this something that you maybe have ever thought about maybe doing kind of some kind of a spin-off or another book with some of these characters because they're so there's so much possibility with these some of these characters to write another book or books.
Yeah, no, I would love to, and I loved the world. I loved the characters. Not all of them survive, obviously. Um, and yeah, and I would love to. I don't know. It's something that I wanted to do, and it's something that I actually have like a pitch for. Um, so it's really a matter of finding someone who would like to take on that story. I think, but I think worst case scenario, like there's a whole other novel that I would like to write that I have kind of in my head. Uh, that involves the grandchildren of the residents of Autumn Springs.
Right.
Um, and but yeah, it's one of those things where like, well, it's hard to write a sequel, uh, or or a spinoff, what have you, if it if it's already been published here, it might be harder to do it somewhere else.
Yeah.
So there's practical complications to it. But I think worst case scenario, what I would like to do, if nothing else, I would like to write at least a novella, uh, that I could publish probably anywhere. Um, and I would love to write like a novella, and have that come out sometime. And
Um,
so that might be something I do, maybe next year. Um, and But yeah, it's definitely something I would love to do, and I really wanted to. I wanted it to be my next book.
but
It didn't work out.
I wasn't talking about any specific character. There's so many characters in there
Yeah, yeah,
they've got
yeah,
so much backstory. Like you said,
yeah.
there's so
No,
many
I had
quirky
an
characters.
idea.
There's three possible witches. There's someone who's into the conspiracies. There's so much that you could explore there that is explored in the
Yeah,
book, but you could go so much deeper into it.
yeah. I love the idea of going back to the community, of Autumn Springs, and setting another story there. And so yeah, that. But it takes two to tango, as they say. So,
Sure.
um, but yes, hopefully one day I will have that opportunity. I would certainly love to, and I do have the idea for it. Um, so yeah, we'll see. We'll see
Uh-huh.
if it works out. If there's, I
I'm
think it's
sure
like
people are going
anything.
to love it.
Look, I think if any, it's like anything. It's like, if it's like a movie, right? If the movie comes out and it does
Movie comes
has a
out
good
and does
opening
well.
weekend, they'll probably
Yeah.
want another one. If the book comes out and does well, maybe they'll want another one. So we'll see.
Uh-huh.
But I would
Yeah,
love to
brilliant.
do it. Yeah.
I'm sure the characters. I mean, there's already a lot of love for the characters already, so that'd be great.
Yeah,
That'd
I've
be
been
great.
very pleased. Been very pleased to see the response from the early reviewers. Because you never know, right? You never know. And
Especially if
so
you, like
far
you
it
said,
seems,
you've only shown it to your wife and your
yeah,
editors.
yeah, yeah. The early reviews have been good, so hopefully that carries on with
Uh-huh.
readers. Yeah,
Brilliant. So just before I let you go, because I've taken too
yeah.
much of your time up already, um,
No worries.
you've got this coming out soon, but I also know that you've got Gothic coming out through Clash in
Yeah,
November. Anything
yes,
else that you can tell us? I mean, that's the exact same book, but it's coming out like a
yeah,
trade paperback,
yeah,
no?
yeah. Yeah. I can run it down for you. There's a list, unfortunately, but there's so yeah. So Autumn Springs Retirement Home Massacre comes out September 30th, and then I have the paperback edition of A Child Alone with Strangers, comes out October 28th. Um, and that paperback edition has corrected text, which is boring, but it also has an introduction by Clay McLeod Chapman, and it has a
Right.
bonus story, a very long bonus story. Um, in that book, there's an FBI agent who alludes to a prior case, and so at the end of I wrote a story about that case that's included in the paperback edition of that. And then in November, to your point, I have Gothic being reissued. That's been out of print for almost a year, so that'll be nice to get that back in print. Um, and that book is about a horror writer named Tyson Parks. Have you read
Yeah,
Gothic
that's the
yet?
only book that I've not read of yours. I wasn't able to get hold
Okay.
of the. I wanted to get hold of it, so I'm really glad that it's coming out through Clash. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually, they just announced today it's on NetGalley now. So if you are a NetGalley guy,
Right. No,
you
I'll
can get
jump
on
on that.
NetGalley.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
there's also
I
ARC.
want to get a physical copy. Yeah.
Flash could get you an ARC. Yeah. So, but it's about a horror writer named Tyson Parks, and it's very meta. The book is very meta. So there's a lot of allusion to Tyson's other novels. So in this new edition, I wrote a 6,000 word novel excerpt from one of Tyson's novels.
All right.
So there's the book, the story, my story, and then Tyson has a novel excerpt that's very creepy, at the end. So that's an original
Right.
content for that issue. And then, 'cause I always like to give, I never just have like slap a new cover on it and then make people buy it again. It's like, if people are going to buy it, I want them to have something fresh and new. So I
Sure.
put it,
Yeah.
so both these have new stories. And then in April of 2026, my Civil War horror novel Serafina comes out, also from Clash.
Right.
Um, and then in September of 2026, I have a new story collection called Traps and Specters. That's coming from Shortwave. That has an introduction by Matt Dinneman, who wrote the Dungeon Crawler Carl
And
books.
I've not read those. I can't wait.
Oh, they're
Everyone's
brilliant.
raving about
Oh,
this.
they're
I can't
brilliant. They're
get into
brilliant.
them.
Yeah. And so he's doing the intro for that. And then in April of 2027, Gothic 2 is
I've
coming
got
out.
think
So that's
two's
what I'm
coming
working
out.
on right
I
now.
didn't know that.
Yeah. Called
Brilliant.
Gothic 2 The End. yeah, so that's the sequel to Gothic, and then I have a new book coming out that hasn't been announced yet in the summer of 2027. So lots of stuff, and I also have a new novella coming out next year. Um, so yeah, there'll be a lot of books coming out, all of which I'm very excited about. Um, and then the hope is once I get Gothic 2 done, I'm gonna jump into a new book for starting to think about 2028.
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh. And then is how was things going with the movie adaptation of Alter? I know that it was wrapped last time I spoke to you. Is there any
yeah,
news about that when it's coming out or anything at all?
yeah, it's yes, I just actually the movie's been filmed. It's in post production. The editing process took longer than they had anticipated. It was like a lot of effects, and they had to do some reshoots and things of that nature. So I think it was supposed to be summer 2025, and now it's going to be. My understanding is it's going to be summer 2026.
Right.
So
Uh-huh.
hope next year Alter should come out, which I'm excited about, and then I'm hoping that my story Failsafe, which was announced with J.J. Abrams producing.
Yeah, I think I
Um,
spotted that on Instagram as well. That's right. Yeah.
yeah, and Brie Larson is starring and producing, and J.T. Molnar is directing, and Brian Duffield wrote the script, which is great. I'm hoping that goes into production pretty soon. Hopefully before the end of the year or early next year. That will go into probably early next year at this point. Hopefully that goes into production, and then hopefully comes out maybe in 2027, hopefully.
Uh-huh.
So that'll be fun. And then I've got a few other things that are all in development, script stages and what have you,
Yeah.
with some great directors and some great writers. And Autumn Springs actually has been optioned for film.
Yeah,
Um,
that doesn't surprise me at all. It'd make a fantastic movie, and like I said, it's like a real boom in those kind of movies right now with
yeah, yeah.
the
There
Knives
seems
Out
to
and
be
all
a
these
good.
kind of things, and White Lotus. It's got a little bit of White Lotus kind of thing going on there as well. So yeah, I think it's
It
something that could
does.
really, yeah.
Yeah, it does. And so yeah, so hopefully, yeah. So we'll see. We'll see. But these things are all take so much time. But yeah, but Alter is the one. Alter is definitely, hopefully, should be come out next year for sure. I think they're very close to picture lock on that, and then yeah, then hopefully Failsafe goes into production, but you never know. Sometimes these things can take years, and sometimes it can move really fast. Really
Really fast.
depends on. Yes, it really depends on the players and what uh, if they want to fast track it or
Yeah, what the
prioritize it.
market's looking like and stuff. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Listen, thank you
So
so
we'll
much
see.
for your time. It's always really good to speak to you, Philip. I wish you the best of luck with this book. I'm sure it's going to go down really, really well. Early reviews
Thank
are
you.
loving the
I
character. I love
appreciate
the
it.
character just a bit. Like I said, I loved it. So it's good. And
Thank you. I appreciate
I
it.
hope to speak to you again sometime soon. You got plenty of things coming
Yeah,
up, so definitely catch up again sometime soon.
let's do it again.
All
All
right,
right.
great to see you. All right, take care of yourself.
Thanks, Howard.
Take
Take
care.
care.
Cheers then. Bye
Bye.
now.